seen things that I can't unsee. I've seen knives sticking out the back of guys' heads and a dude trying to jerk it out and he can't get it out. So he just begins kicking him all in his head, kicking him down a flight of stairs. And that was about a deodorant, $1.79 deodorant.
Welcome to Convicted. I'm Travis Pendergrass. I'm your host. So for the first episode, I want to go ahead and dive into what got me to being a convicted felon. As a juvenile, I had 3 charges, 3 separate arrests. 2 charges were grand theft, and the 3rd charge was burglary with a battery. I quickly kind of determined that this isn't how I wanted my life to go, and I made some changes. I moved from the area that I was, and I eventually went to the military. I thought going to the military that my life would be smooth sailing and everything would be pretty much leveled out from there. After returning home from Iraq, it was difficult for me to land a job, so I kind of backtracked and caught a couple more charges. So as an adult, I have leasing a location to traffic, possession of marijuana with intent to sell, fleeing to elude, and then a second charge of fleeing to elude. So as a convicted felon, I don't shy away from that. I use that to inspire others to sit up here and think about the choices that they make, and I use that to motivate myself to go harder. So that's Convicted. That's the purpose of the podcast, and that's why we're here. So I want to go ahead and introduce my first guest. And this is a lifelong friend, a partner of mine, somebody that I've known for a while. And he's kind of changed my life with kind of the mistakes that he's made. He's motivated me to think twice. So this is Michael Rosado, and he was sentenced to life without the possibility of parole. Meaning for me and everybody that I spoke to is he's never going to be free. So the fact that he's here with us today, I think it's amazing. Mike, go ahead and introduce yourself for us.
Well, my name is Michael Rosado, like you said, and this is a lifelong friend of mine. A little backstory is I was involved in a gang. I eventually became the leader of that gang in Florida, inside the prison system. I was a troublemaker when I was a kid. When I was a juvenile, by the time I was 14, I had 9 felonies and 14 misdemeanors. In and out of trouble, in and out of trouble. Thought I was going to straighten back out, and eventually ended up catching a first-degree murder charge, second-degree attempted murder charge, and a conspiracy to first-degree murder when I was 16 years old. I spent 26 long years incarcerated. After all of that time, I was released 7 months ago. And back into society to try to make a new life, to try to adjust to a second chance. During that time period, there's an incredible story of redemption for myself. There's an incredible story of my son and how he grew without having a father and living in a troubled household and making the most of himself. During that time period, there's a story of how God always had his hand on me, man. And I still, to this day, I exalt him in all things. There are bumps, there's mistakes, there's mishaps. You know, being a child in an adult environment, you're gonna slip. You know what I mean? You're gonna make mistakes. There's a lot of death, there's a lot of tragedy, there's losing people, you know. But, you know, here I am today. Shit, I remember when me and Travis, we used to share clothes together. We were young, we were kids. Like he said, we've known each other 30 years. And in school, we'd talk to the same chicks, we'd be in the same classes, and then we go hang out. And I remember bringing you to a bad place, man, in your life. A place that you probably shouldn't have been in as a young man, but here we are lost. You know, we're lost in a transitional period of becoming young men, becoming young adults, and then we bond from our broken families and find a way.
That's good. That's a lot. That is exactly who you are. So you mentioned a lot in there. You mentioned your charges. You mentioned what your sentence was. You were 16 at the time of the crime?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And then sentenced at 17?
I was sentenced at 17. I spent a year in the county jail waiting to go to trial.
Okay. At 17 years old, how did you feel when you first heard your sentence?
Well, there's two separate phases to a trial that's got to do with capital murder. And the reason why I wasn't given the death penalty, I had just missed something. The death penalty was on the table at first. I signed a stipulation that in exchange for me giving up my rights to a 12-person jury, that I would take a 6-person jury and the state wouldn't pursue the death penalty. So I was literally fighting the death penalty at 16 years old.
Wow.
There's two parts, though. There's the actual trial phase where you're presented evidence and people are given a chance to testify, and then you're found guilty or innocent, or, there's a mistrial, right? And then there's a sentencing phase. So what happened is all the impact from everything happened when I was found guilty. That was hard. That was difficult because I was still young and still battling and not accepting that I was in a bad position. You can't go tell, you know what I mean? Because that's not a part of the code, right? So I'm forced into a situation where I had 14 co-defendants and people that were accused, I'm not gonna go into those details, but people that were accused of ordering me to do this. So those people were found not guilty or acquitted, or charges were dropped, because at that point in time, I'm the person that's in there keeping my mouth shut, while the other individuals who were supposed gang members and tough guys and so on and so forth it was all him. It was him over there. He had to do this all on his own. It couldn't have been us, right? So at that point in time, I knew I had to get life, because the minimum mandatory for first-degree murder is death and life. Those are the only two options you can get with a first-degree murder charge. So considering the fact that I had signed away the death penalty, I knew I was getting life as soon as I was found guilty. So when I was found guilty was the hard part. And there's a manner of stoicism that you got to present even as a child, as a teenager. The mark of a man is not having this reaction. So I didn't want to have that reaction. I didn't want to be weak. But when I was found guilty, I went out and sat on a crate. I remember this like it's yesterday, because I was like, this is the time that I had to become a man. This is it. All childish things, all the games, all the play while I was in the county jail, hanging out in the juvenile pod, being reckless, all of that had to come to an end.
Wow.
And I said, man, this is the last time I'm gonna cry. And I sat down on a milk crate, and I cried, man. I cried because I knew the loss that was coming. I could understand it even at that age. And I said, this is it, man. I ain't crying no more, man. This is it. I'm gonna leave all these tears out here on this rec yard.
Wow.
I'm gonna go back in and face what I gotta face. So the sentencing phase was after that, and I already knew I was getting life.
Okay. So you were mentally prepared for it?
Absolutely.
You mentioned a lot. Let me see. You mentioned about bringing me into a dark space. And it's funny, I kind of chuckle at that because I have a younger brother, and he kind of hangs around the wrong people and makes some bad decisions. And my mom is always, well, it's the other person's fault. And I've always known, no, it's never the other person's fault. It's always our own choices that bring us into our situations. So I just chuckle at that because it's, as a juvenile, I looked for gang life because it filled a void that I was missing growing up. My father died in a prison cell when I was 3 years old. I come from a single family home. So I didn't have that positive role model in front of me. The role model that I had was, even though you're younger by a month, I looked up to you. I looked up to, who I was around. And I thought, okay, this is the right path. So I understand what you're saying is you brought me to a situation, but no, ultimately it's me and my choices and what I chose to do or what path I chose to follow, right? But I want to pause for a second, right? Because I want to know your childhood and kind of what got you to the choices that you made to commit that crime, right? So growing up, like what was it? Single family home, two parents in the household. What was the dynamics of the family situation growing up? Let's start back there for a second.
Single mother,
Okay.
raising a young boy. Of course, 90% of people that are involved in the life that we were involved in, especially here in Florida that I've dealt with. I can't say as a national consensus because I haven't done the research, but most of the people that I've had interaction with, no matter what clique they represented or what group they were involved with, come from a broken home.
Right.
So you're going to see single parents mostly that are raising people that are susceptible to that family unit that's in the street. You know what I mean? Because that's what they tell you. It's a family. It's a brotherhood.
Right.
So.
I asked the question, but I felt like I had a good understanding. It's single family home, right? For the same reasons why you mentioned. What brought you into gang life? Like when was it? What age were you? Like how did you get associated with it? Why did you choose the gang that you chose? And what gang were you in?
Well, I'm going to tell you, this is a very big disparity right here. The life that I was living on the streets, that gang life that was out there, it was real, but it's not as real as the gang life that's in prison. Prison is a breeding ground. Prison is the place for it. And, I'm not going to knock what anybody does. Whatever you do, that's what you do. That's what the choices that you make in life, right? Like you said earlier. But I was influenced. I was influenced in many different ways. And I wanted to be a part of something. I wanted to have this place where I felt safe with individuals that were like-minded like me. And it was the era for us too, man. We grew up in an era where things were changing. Rap music was coming to the forefront. I'm not blaming rap music for anything, but this was the mentality. This was the mentality of the youth at the time.
All right.
We were very much involved in what was going on, like the beef, the fighting, the extra. It was just there. So there are two separate things, though. There is the life that was on the street when I was a child, where you really don't know what you're doing out there. That was really like not swimming in the ocean. It was like swimming in a river. Okay. When I got to prison, that was like swimming in the ocean. And I was a part of Folk Nation. I was a representative of the Gangster Disciples, the Insane Gangster Disciples specifically in Florida. And there's a lot of details and stuff that separate Florida from the rest of the United States in that regard. Those details are going to be extremely private. That's not something that's going to be aired and broadcast here. But, being a member and being a representative, I can still say that I walked that path in the right direction, even as a child. And that's difficult. That's hard, because you face those pressures. You don't understand. You don't really know. I don't think anybody really knows until later on in life about anything. As we grow as men, you could choose a profession. Oh, I want to be an astronaut. You be a child. I want to be an astronaut. But you don't know till you get up in space.
Sure.
You could say, man, I want to do trucking. I want to do anything. But you don't know
until you get into it.
Until you get into it. Okay. So, really getting into it was in prison.
Okay. So, fast forward. So, prison. So, I've never been to prison. I've been to jail. I've always had good money to pay on some lawyers and kind of kept me out of prison, which is great. But prison, if I were going to prison, I would think, man, prison life is like this. I'm going to have to fight. I'm going to have to, do all these types of things that is just, what I think we on the outside that haven't been to prison think of. 17 again, going in there, what did you think prison was going to be like? And then just to give you my follow-up question, what was prison like?
The expectations were a lot. You see movies, you see things on TV, and it's not the same. And it's not the same from each individual's experience.
Okay.
People handle prison differently. Prison defines your weaknesses and your strengths. Like, so you could have a good idea of who you are as a person and then walk through that gate, walk through that walkway, And then all of those weaknesses come out, all of those strengths come out. And it's a very predator or prey area, and not so much predator or prey, because there's people that are weak that survive prison and come out.
Okay.
But it's surviving mind, body, and soul.
Okay.
Being able to walk out and hold your head up, be able to look yourself in the mirror and say, am I good? Did I make it? You know, that's a big deal. The expectation was, oh, there's going to be people dying. There's going to be people that want to rape you. There's going to be people like all of this stuff.
Right.
It wasn't really like that, and it was like that. It was like that for some people, and it wasn't like that for some people.
Okay.
If you got teeth and claws, people really don't want to mess with you.
Okay.
Like, they're not coming at you that way. And other people that got teeth and claws aren't trying to go at somebody who has teeth and claws, because you can get hurt. So it's that same animalistic, predatory nature that you watch for. And if you've got something to think with, you can move better. So a lot of people don't think things through. They just react, or they're trapped by drug addiction, or they're trapped by sexual addiction, or they're trapped by their own weaknesses, which are getting defined in that area. So.
Okay. So I met with you the first week you were out, right? Let me see. I pulled up. We went to, where did we go?
Hold on,
Wingstop?
Hold on. You pulled up in a semi truck for one,
I did.
like in the hood, because that's where I live. I live in the hood right now.
Right.
So you pulled up in a semi truck in the hood,
Right.
and like it was like an impact, because here you are, this big personality coming from, because you wrote me, bro. Like let's go to that. Let's go to the fact that while I was locked up, man, you wrote to me. You took time out, and I remember your letter, man. Your first letter to me was like, it was later on. It was after a time had passed, after you had sowed your oats and grown a little bit.
Right.
Because that's when you come into your manhood and realize man-like responsibilities. And you had a man-like responsibility to write to your dog.
Right.
So, you know, you wrote to me, and I remember, man, the biggest thing in that letter was, bro, when I heard the news that you got arrested, my mom called me, and I was on the phone with her.
Yep.
And you dropped to your knees, and you were like, no, like not him. You know what I mean?
Yep.
Not this.
I tell my kids, I'm very upfront with my kids. I'm very upfront with anybody. Like I said, I don't shy away with it. I'm a convicted felon. So it was 6 months to a year where I left the area that we're from. And I was working on a job, and I got a phone call. And it was my mom. And my mom said, Michael just got arrested for murder. And I dropped to my knees, and I literally cried. And I think it was for two reasons. It was, you and I were so close, right? I stayed with you at one point. We did everything together. It's, you know, if you saw me, you saw you. I dropped to my knees because I knew that if I was still in that area, I would have probably been arrested with you, and I would have been facing a murder charge as well. Like, it's 100% in my mindset that that's the outcome that it would have been. And then it was you're going to jail for murder. Like, in my head, I knew absolutely nothing about the details, but you're going to jail for murder. And it changed. Like, I was already in the process of changing my life, but it changed because I was like, I don't want to make these choices. I don't want to make the same mistakes. Let me learn from the mistakes I've already made, but let me also learn from the mistakes that people close to me have made. You know, my father, like I said, he died in a prison cell when I was 3 years old. You going to prison for life. I didn't think you would ever come home, right? And that was later on when I found out the sentence in life without the possibility. I was like, you're never going to see the light of day. And being gone at 16 years old, like that's crazy. That's rough. You know, I pulled up on you. We went to Wingstop, right? And it didn't click to me that this is the first time you've had Wingstop. Like, you've never had Wingstop before. You never had, like, really wings before. Mm-hmm. And I was sitting there, and I was listening to your stories, and my daughter was there, and she was listening, and she was just in awe, like, oh, my gosh, like, he's really been through some stuff in life. And I noticed, you know, how I left you at 16 years old. You came back different. You know, I could see that you were watching your surroundings. You were looking at who's coming through the door, and it reminded me of my own experiences with PTSD from war. And it was like, damn, like I can see what he's going through, like that transition, right? And you got scars in your face. Those are visible. I could see that. What was the transition like? And then I guess before we get to the transition, what are some stories from within the walls that you've kind of had to deal with? Either hospitalizations, conflicts, like what are some big things that stand out that was like, wow, I really went through this?
Man, there's so much. And there's so much that I've seen. Again, everybody's experience is different. I've seen people go through things. I've been through 2 gladiator dorms, which are youthful offender dorms where everybody's under 21. We live together, we bond together, we have friendships together. You know, my missteps aren't going to be the same as the next person's missteps. There's certain people that might not do the same thing in a situation that I did. You know, I had a life sentence, so like, I'm not really scared of getting more time. You know, I try to stay morally sound. That's what I try to do. A lot of people don't try to do that. A lot of people compromise their morals for other things. Drugs, coffee, cigarettes. There's people that do compromise their morals for anything in prison. You know, there's people that held their morals. They kept that solid lighthouse, that cornerstone ahead of them. And they were like, this is my cornerstone. This is my foundation. This is where I go. So in tougher situations where I'll be outnumbered, possibly I was going to be harmed, I didn't back down. Now, the violence really didn't come. I don't know why. I think it's because God had his hand on me. I really, really do. I feel like God has just always worked in my life, and he hasn't allowed, harm to come to me. I really feel that it's been him. It hasn't been me. But I was in tough situations, and I didn't back down. And there was times where my life was on the line. There's times where I ended up in the emergency room, getting put back together, Those aren't simple things. Those aren't simple stories. My pain and my hurt weren't really real to me. It didn't even affect me. Like when I would be hurt by something, it would just be something, okay, I just keep going, And it really wasn't that traumatic, because if you look in this, in the overall scheme of things in life, I didn't have cancer. I'm not in a wheelchair. You know what I mean? Right. There's things that people go through that's way worse than prison. There's people that physical body is prison. And I'm like, how do they keep going through life? Right. Then those people look at me and like, I couldn't do life in prison. How does he go through that? Right. So it's different for everybody, man. But, prison is a violent place. It's a place where you're gauging your manhood against everybody else's manhood around you. It's where if you have an alpha personality, you're either going to dominate your surroundings or you're not, And all that tough guy stuff goes out the window. Okay. People always put on, oh, this is like that. It's dudes trying to help each other get through. I've met some of the best people in prison. I've met truly amazing people that weren't given a shot, like some people were given a shot. And, they're still my friends to this day. They're still my associates to this day. I keep in touch with many people. I write back to the prison system. I get phone calls from the prison system. And it's hard to keep up with everybody because, again, after 26 years, how many good people did you meet? How many bad people did you meet? Okay, I met a lot of bad people, but I met a lot of good people. And I just, and that's something else. If you're watching this and I haven't reached out to you, man, just know my heart is still with the prison system and the people that are suffering in there today. It's not a good place. It's not a great place. Maintain, keep your heart completely astute and just follow that dream and hope that you get out too, hope that you survive.
Gotcha. But, you mentioned gladiator dorm. Why do they call it gladiator dorm?
Because you got a bunch of men that are 21 and under, 10 years. Usually the guys had 10 years or better, or they were too tough for the JIT camps, and they would move them from the JIT camps to these gladiator dorms. So if you were like a little bit more aggressive or a little bit more tough, you ended up in these dorms. And you're talking about 70 guys that are under 21 that are violent criminals living in the dorm together. What do you think is going on in there? Right. Like I've watched people fight about the dumbest stuff in the world. I've watched people get into the stupidest arguments to where it's 10 people versus other 10 people arguing something that's plainly not correct in either zone. And it's just how it is. And, the first dorm that I went to, there was like 2 white dudes in there that were from weird places. There was 3 Spanish dudes in there, and one of them was the biggest Mexican you ever seen before in your life. And, the prison disparity is the majority is black in prison. Like, there's a lot of black people that are getting convicted in Florida. Like, you don't get to see it unless you're there.
Right.
But there is a disparity. And we know that. We know that in America now. If you're informed, you've watched The 13th on Netflix. And, if you're interested in prison and about how there is a racial disparity in prison, right, you've read Michelle Alexander's The New Jim Crow. So here we are. I'm from middle of nowhere, Florida. And here goes all of these guys that know each other from the streets. The majority's Fort Lauderdale and Dade, and they're beefing with each other. And then they're as a group, they're beefing with North Florida and Central Florida. So there's all these little beefs. And it just takes a little bit to spark it off. And you've got a 40-on-40 match. People outside hitting each other with sticks.
Yes.
Literally, I had a friend of mine who's out now. He did 14 years in prison. One of our friends was outside in this big rumble, outside getting jumped. And he got inside the officer station, and he's hitting the buttons in the officer station where he's not supposed to be at to get the doors open. Yeah. So that everybody can get outside where he's getting jumped at. But these are the things. This is what happens, young guys, young men.
Literally a gladiator zone.
And I've seen men die in there. I've seen men get hit one time in their neck, cause a blood clot in their neck, and the blood clot shoot up to their brain and cause a brain aneurysm. You've seen things like that. You've seen mistakes. I've seen good men knock down, drag out, fight, and shake hands afterwards and be able to live in the dorm with each other. And that's a big thing. So, I've seen those guys later on in life doing better with themselves, coming from a rough spot. A couple of those guys were juvenile lifers like myself, and they're home now and they're making a productive life and doing the right thing. And very much all of these guys that I'm saying who have made that change and transition are very deep in the word. They're very much praying every day. You can see it. You can see a person who's changed.
So you mentioned a lot. We talked about the gladiator dorm. What is violence like in prison?
So from personal experience, again, I've got scars all over me. I've got a scar on my side that's through body armor. You know what I mean? I've got a scar on my neck where steel was inside of my neck at one point in time. I've had my face surgery on my face to where I've had broken bones in my face. It's knock down, drag out when it goes. When you're there and it's you versus another person and your survival's on the line, especially where a weapon is involved. And I've seen the after effects of people that were hit with claw hammers. The whole side of their head caved in. A guy that needed 40 stitches on the back of his head from where his skin peeled away. I've heard people cry. I've watched people fight with knives, razors, and it's the cuts. Like with the razors, it's the cuts. It's a lot of bleeding. But violence has went through its own change process inside of prison. Prison used to be a place where 2 men could fight, and then that's what it was. Like, a guy that didn't have life didn't need a knife. Like, why would you need a knife? Because your intention of picking up a weapon is to harm someone to the point to where you either seriously injure them or they die. Now, in this day and age, 26 years later, these guys got knives all over the place, and they just cut each other. They're not trying to kill each other. They're not trying to do great bodily harm. They're just trying to cut so the other person has to leave the institution and they avoid a problem. There's a lot of non-confrontation now. And It used to be very confrontation. It used to be man to man. Now it's group to group, organization to organization. It's changed completely. So the level of violence now, believe it or not, is more, but in a weird way, it's less.
That makes sense, though. I get what you're saying.
Yeah.
So that before it was, if I'm hearing it right, before it was survival. It was, okay, if I'm going to fight, it's for, survival. And now it's for, okay, if I fight, I can get them moved. Or if I slice them, I can get them moved to avoid future conflicts. Is that kind of what it is?
And like getting people out of the way.
Okay.
It's a different mentality, and it's no less dangerous than what was before.
Right.
But guys could fight, and it was just a fight and shake hands afterwards. Now it ain't that way, because you got guys that are just making little homemade knives and cutting. Now this is in Florida. This isn't the prison system as a whole, and that's not every guy's mentality. But it's a change. It's a transitional process. And where old meets new, there's always a bigger conflict, where the guy who has this older mind state to where I'm gonna do great bodily harm, or I'm gonna kill somebody, God forbid I'm gonna kill somebody, meets the newer generation where they're not prepared for that. And it's a weird, abrasive conflict. So it's a dangerous place. And again, I've seen things that I can't unsee. I've seen knives sticking out the back of guys' heads, and a dude trying to jerk it out, and he can't get it out. So he just begins kicking him all in his head, kicking him down a flight of stairs. And that was about a deodorant, $1.79 deodorant. This dude put a knife through the back of this dude's head. Not your kitchen knives now. You're thinking, right, okay, it's a steak knife or something like that. No, these are homemade weapons. So it's made out of heavy steel, sharpened on concrete, wrapped with a bootlace handle or a sheet handle, and then you've got some barbaric weapon to try and plunge into somebody's body. So it's a little different.
You mentioned body armor in prison. What is body armor? What is that?
Well, sometimes if you're getting into a situation, guys would make vests or body armor of sorts. That's had its own transition, because people find better ways to make body armor or better ways to protect themselves. But usually it's made of like magazines, and you want to get good magazines. National Geographic, believe it or not, is the best magazine to make body armor out of, because it's got that thick plastic sheets. And then you would cut it and form it to you, and either wrap yourself in plastic or wrap yourself in tape or whatever you could get to wrap yourself. Okay. I've seen people make vests. I've seen people sew their own vests and then make pockets for their body armor. And that's for dangerous situations where somebody possibly has an ice pick, like a solid rounded point weapon, to where they're trying to plunge and puncture your body. Those are dangerous spots. You got to have the right kind of defense,
So 26 years, what was your transition like? When did you say, hey, enough is enough about being young and kind of foolish with my decisions? I'm in here. When did you transition into a more sound decision-making self and say, hey, look, I want to live differently?
It's always been there. I've always wanted to do better. I've always had that need, even from a child. And it's the opportunity. I gained a little bit of influence, and I got to a point of comfort. And I've always tried to guide people on the right path. That's partially guilt, man. When you've done the things that I've done in life, you carry an immense amount of guilt with you, or you're not really being a good human being. And there's a lot of people that are like that. A lot of people that are not good human beings. But living with that tremendous amount of guilt, you always want to do better. You always want to help somebody. You always want to give people a chance. Even when some people don't deserve that chance, you want to give them that chance. I'm going to tell you when I first started to see a different light. My concept and my mind state was always mercy was for the weak. You see me fighting the bear, you go save the bear, because mercy was for the weak. I went through a class, and this was years ago. This
is a class in prison.
This is a class in prison. This was actually a class called The Way of Love. It was in the chapel. And I wasn't really a chapel person because, again, the belief system in the chapel was, if you're scared, go to church. So most people stayed away from church unless they were scary, and I wasn't a scary person.
Okay.
You know, there's always fears now, but conquering the fear is what courage is. That's what bravery is. So there's always the fear, but dominating your own fears, that's what's important. You know, if I'm walk around afraid all day, you're prey. So that's a big thing. But I went to this class, and you know, my heart had always been trying to stay on that noble, morally sound path in an incredibly unmorally sound environment. You know, whether it's the guards or the administration or, you know, the people that you're surrounded by, they're human beings. They have mistakes, they have faults, they have flaws, and they have strengths too, you know. I've met great correctional officers. I met horrible correctional officers. I've met great wardens. I've met horrible wardens. I've met great people that were convicts. I've met horrible people that are convicts. So anyways, back to the mercy. So I always believed that mercy was for the weak. And I was like, you know, I'm just going to keep going. It's going to keep going. I'm going to keep going forward no matter what. No matter what gets in my way, I'm just going to keep going forward. And this class, and it came from a very simple person who said this. And he said, mercy. He's like, how can you ever expect to have mercy if you don't give mercy? And that concept of mercy as an adult, you know, as a grown man, was just so profound to me. How can I ever expect to have any mercy in life if I don't give it to others? And it's hard. It's hard for us to get out of that judgmental state in life.
Right.
It's hard for us not to be like, oh, that's the bad guy over there, or that's the dude, or we refer to child molesters as chomos in prison. Look at those chomos over there. Those dudes are da-da-da-da-da-da-da. But mercy, and I'm not saying have mercy for everybody, because that might not be your thing. But if you're really walking in faith and you're really like a person who spiritually is sound, you're going to have mercy for those people.
Right.
I realized, man, that I wanted mercy. I didn't deserve it necessarily. I don't think anybody really just comes out and just deserves mercy. You got to kind of earn it. And I started to try to make practices in life that were more vocal in people having mercy and people seeing things and being a teacher and being the natural leader that I've always been my life. My whole life, I've been a natural leader.
Right.
To using those skills and coming into a man and coming into that leadership and guiding people in a better way. And I found purpose. I found purpose in doing the right thing. You know, not just doing the right thing, but finding a purpose in it.
Have you pinned down what your purpose is now?
To be a servant, to be obedient to God, to exalt him, to be whatever tool he needs me to be.
What is he calling you to be right now? You're free. You're out of prison. And we'll talk about that in just a moment, like how you got here. Mm-hmm. But what tool is he wanting you to be right now?
I mean, who really knows the mentality of God? You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You just feel things. You just feel things in your heart, and you're pushed in a direction. So right now, I'm working with a group called Charlotte Reentry Initiative, and I met with the national director of Damascus 2 weeks ago. These people work through reentry. I was the president of a faith and character-based program for a long time inside a prison. I've helped hundreds of men get their life in order, and they've helped me because these same guys were the guys who taught me how to use what I have, use whatever God-given talents I have to help other people.
Okay.
So they call them, a lot of people calling me to this day. They text me, hey, man, can you give me some advice? Or they give me advice. Hey, this is the way that you need to go with this. And this is another thing that I often say. People talk about iron sharpening iron. That's a big thing. It's a big thing that people use now in Christian circles. Oh, iron sharpens man as iron sharpens iron. It's like a big thing that people use now. But I've been talking about this for a long time that predates the popularity of it in current society. And the thing about iron sharpening iron, it doesn't sharpen if you just set it down on the table next to each other. Well, how do you sharpen iron?
Right.
You bang it together, right?
Has to be emotion, yeah.
Yeah, there's going to be conflict between the iron. The iron's going to hit the other iron. It's going to slide against. It's going to abrade each other, right?
Okay.
So that's the thing, is that you can't just sharpen each other by setting each other down. You got to go out and do it. You got to go out and be active. You got to be involved. You've got to go. You can't just sit back and be like, you know what, this iron sharpening iron right here.
Right.
It doesn't work like that.
So right now your purpose is helping others, basically. It's giving some direction, pointing people on a straight path. Is that kind of your purpose right now?
Sort of. It's basically right now getting an awareness about reentry
Okay.
and the people who need help. People like me. I got out, you know, I lost my mother, my father, my grandparents, you know, I'm not in a family state. So I get out after 26 years. And who's there to support me?
Right.
I get out. I actually got involved into a reentry program, and they gave me a place to live, because where was I going to live? You know?
Right.
Who's going to take a guy like me into their house who's on probation, who has all of these deficiencies? I have no retirement built up. I have no great job skills that I learned, because where did I learn job skills at? I've been in prison for 26 years. I can teach you how to sharpen a knife.
Right.
I can teach you how to make a battery pack out of batteries to heat your food up
Right.
when the hot water doesn't work in a water fountain. You know, you can learn different things. So the things that I learned were associated with prison.
Right.
Didn't
You
learn-
know, it's so funny because, you know, I watch some stuff on TikTok, and people in prison are so, they can make anything out of very little, right? And it always amazes me. I'm like, you know, I will never need to know how to do this, but I'm watching this because I'm like, how did they do this, right? So you mentioned the battery packs with heating the water up and people cooking and stuff like that. When I was, you know, counting time, a prison guard said to me, he was like, why are you in here? And it was like, why is he asking me, why am I in here? And it was like, I didn't fit the description of what he thought his inmates looked like or acted like. I'm very respectful. I'm yes, sir, no, sir, yes, ma'am, no, ma'am. I roll my socks up. I roll my boxers up. That just comes from being in the military. I'm organized. You know, I'm planning. And he said, you know, the only difference between me and you is I get to go home at night. You know what I'm saying? And I wasn't caught for my crimes. And I believe everybody commits crimes, whether it's very small or large. Everybody commits crimes, but nobody's, you mentioned having mercy. Nobody's different. You know, if I can't judge you off of your mistakes that you made, because I'm making mistakes when I go home. But yeah, so you mentioned the skills and what have you trained for, but you came out and it seems like you got a fresh start. You got rolling, you got a couple jobs going out the way. Do you feel like you pick up on tasks very well? Do you feel like you're behind the learning curve, but mentally, do you feel like you can grasp it? Can you get it? Can we throw you in a college setting and you say, okay, I can follow along. I know what's going on.
Part of the thing that kept me alive in prison is adaptability to all circumstances. Mm-hmm. And that's a belief for me. That's a practice. You have to practice certain things. You have to meditate on certain things. You have to develop and sharpen your will.
Right.
So I feel that I'm going to do good regardless. And I've got to, again, I believe in God. Like, a lot of people say they believe in God, but you got to trust him. Mm. Even in my worst situation since I've been out, I just kept faith. You know, when I was pedaling a bicycle or walking to a certain place, or I didn't get the help that I needed, that isn't anybody else's fault. They ain't made the decision. I made the decisions that put me here.
Right.
And I can't be a weight or a burden on anybody else. And like what you were saying with judgment, there's going to be judgment with me.
Right.
There's certain jobs that I can't have. There's certain people that not discriminate, but feel that it's a safety hazard for a convicted felon, especially someone convicted of murder, to do certain jobs. So, you know, I'm excluded from a lot of things. But on the other side of that, you know, and we haven't talked about my legal team. I have an amazing legal team, by the way. I would not be here if it wasn't for them. And one of them said that if everybody walked around with a sign on their forehead of the worst thing that they'd done, we would get nowhere as a society. So just imagine everybody walking around with the worst thing that they had done in their whole life, the thing that they were embarrassed about, the secret that they came and pushed down into their heart, that thought that they had at one point in time, whether it's on the road and somebody's honking at you and you're like, oh my gosh, I could get out and just bash this dude's head in with a tire iron. If that thought was on their head, like printed,
right,
and you walked around society looking at everyone with all of these bad things, where would we be?
Right.
And we're like, oh my gosh, this guy over here, look at him, look at his sign.
Right. It's funny. Have you ever been asked the question, if you could have any superpower, what would it be?
I've been asked that before.
So if I could have any superpower, it would be I want to read minds. But you know how scary that would be? It'd be for the same reason. It's like, wow, this guy's thinking this person is thinking this. It'd be draining. You'd be like, oh my gosh, I know exactly what everybody is thinking, right? So you mentioned that, and that just brought that thought to my head. Back on track. So you're free now, right? What changed? Because you weren't supposed to be, you were supposed to die in prison. Mm-hmm. Like that's, when I got your sentence, that's what it was. I was like, Mike is going to die in prison.
Yeah.
How did that change?
It changed through the United States Supreme Court. They realized that juveniles cognitively don't develop fully until they're 25. So juveniles are not culpable until they're around 25. That's why we have laws against drinking and smoking. Like you can't smoke now in Florida until you're 21. Why? Because they don't believe that you're able to make that decision, as an adult until you're 21.
Okay.
Right? But we put children who are under 21 in situations where they have to make tough grown decisions and they make the wrong decision. What do you expect? You're not allowed to drink. Why? Why are you not allowed to drink until you're 21? Because they don't believe that while you're intoxicated, you're going to make the right decisions.
Right.
Or that you're grown enough to make the decision to drink. There's a lot of things that you can't do until you're 16. There's a lot of things you can't do until you're 18. Mm-hmm. Why? Because they don't feel like you're old enough, right? That your brain hasn't developed. It isn't a term of years. It's that your brain hasn't developed. And, the research is, the science behind it is that a person their brain doesn't fully develop until they're 25. So this law came out that said juveniles with mandatory life sentences are to be given a second chance to be sentenced to something other than life. I had a mandatory life sentence. So I was given the opportunity to be resentenced. A judge looked at the situations and details of my case and said, you know what? This dude was locked up for gang-related murder when he was 16. We're going to give him a second chance. Give him a 40-year sentence. I got that 40-year sentence in 2017. Went back last year, which would be 2024.
Okay.
And went back before another judge. And the judge was presented with an overwhelming amount of evidence to my rehabilitation. And I want to say this now. The rehabilitation and rehabilitating someone is a conscious choice. Not everybody's going to make that choice.
Right.
I made that choice. And where, the temptations of prison and things that were going on there, I made the choice to go in a different direction. And it was hard, man. It was hard to see, my peers look at me like, why are you going to church so much? Why are you doing this? And I'm not a soft person, but I'm not the toughest guy in the room either. You know? There's always going to be somebody that's bigger and badder than you. There's always going to be somebody that's tougher. And that tough guy front, man, it don't get you nowhere. It doesn't. So being involved in programming, like I said, and helping people, that was important. It was important in here. And it reflected in my actions with other people. People that were, very well educated, very good at dealing with people. Doctors. I deal with a doctor named Dr. Madosky, and he's an EDD. He's got a dual doctorate. And he's like, you're a good man. You're a good person. And hearing that reinforced the fact that, I am a good person.
Right.
Despite all of the things that I've done and I've been through, I need to forgive myself. And that was hard, man. It was so hard for me to forgive myself, man. It was something that I consciously wrestled with every single day. The things that I had done, man, it didn't need to happen. Right. It was so senseless, man. It didn't need to happen. So struggling with that and moving forward, that part was reflected, and just said, you know what? You deserve that chance, but I'm going to keep my eye on you.
Right.
So I have a massive amount of probation and obligations that I need to fulfill. And I have an obligation to be successful. And hopefully, you know, I continue to push in that direction and do better. And I can make something of myself. And other people will be given a chance. And when they're given that chance, hopefully they'll do the right thing also.
There's a lot of, because I was at your sentencing hearing, one of them, right? And I've always, you see a lot of stuff on social media, oh, free so-and-so. And it doesn't matter what crime they go to jail for. Everybody just wants their loved ones free and whatnot. I've never said that. I've never said free Mike, free Rosado, nothing like that. Because I feel as men, we're accountable for our actions. You know, whatever we do, we have to stand and be accountable for it. Does that mean that we can't be forgiven for it or we can't be rehabilitated? No. But that's on the individual, like you said. Not everybody can be rehabilitated.
That's right.
When I testified, I strongly believe that listening to you at 16 years old, listening to you at 24 years old, listening to you at 30 years old, I've seen the growth. I've seen the personal growth. I've seen or I've heard, you know, saying the mentalities change along the years. And I definitely felt he deserves a second chance, right? And it wasn't just me. It was like you said, it was the judge. It was everybody else around you. Everybody in your camp has said that had interactions with you have said, no, Rosado deserves to be free. And you do deserve, you know, a second chance at life, and that's great. Getting the news that, okay, Florida changed the laws, and then getting the judge to say that, hey, we're going to give you a second chance. How did you feel?
I was overwhelmed. Like, you know, I'm gonna tell you in 2017 when I went back, you know, people always talk about giving something up to God, and I'm gonna keep doing this. A lot of people might not be into religion or spiritual. That's fine. Everybody's got their own chosen cup of tea. Mm-hmm. But like I never understood what giving something up to God was. And people will say that, oh, I gave it up to God. I don't think they even really know. But I sat down before I was sentenced and I was like, God, whatever you choose. You know, if you choose to send me back to prison with life, man, hey, that's where I go back to. That's what I do, you know, and you wake up every day and you do it. Right. You know, I'm going to continue to keep my heart solid. I'm not going to blame you for my mistakes. I'm not going to lash out at you for the things that are not right in my life. Right. And if you choose to let me go, you choose to let me go. And I felt it. I felt the relief. I was sitting there. I was in a holding tank, waist chained and shackled, handcuffs, all the good stuff. And I'm sitting there, whatever you choose, man, whatever you choose. And then I remember the day that I was going home, I had a hard time sleeping. Mm-hmm. And
yeah, it's hard too. I remember.
Listen, no lie. I have an amazing legal team. All right. Like, I would not be out if not their heart being involved in this. Mm-hmm. And they volunteered, like my attorney volunteered back on my case. He didn't have to. This guy is next level. My other attorney, she didn't have to do what she had to do. My forensic psychologist, my mitigation specialist, these individuals they're next level. All right. Like they're top of their game. I kind of had an inkling that I stood a chance. You know, I stood a good shot. Okay. But the night before I didn't sleep and I opened my Bible and I would randomly do that throughout the week. I just open my Bible and look, see whatever the word gives me. And I opened to Psalm 30. And Psalm 30 sits with me to this day. And if you read it, you will know. And I felt it in my heart. Now, when I got that news, I still cried like a baby. And there's pictures from the courtroom. I cried all over my attorney's shoulder. But it wasn't just for me. It was for the people that I knew it's for the people that I had done wrong to, too. You know, that's a tricky situation. Do you really deserve it? Did I really deserve this second chance? And yes, I did. I really did. And, you know, I'm grateful for it. I'm grateful for the courts. I'm grateful for the U.S. Supreme Court. I'm grateful for my attorneys. I'm grateful for the state attorney. I'm grateful for the people that were involved to see me home. I'm grateful for the people that were mentors to me in prison. I'm grateful for the people that were just a guy that needed advice that I might have helped. I'm grateful to all of those people that I could help brighten their day or give them a strong word. And I don't care about the judgment that comes for that.
Right.
Because people will judge you for giving them a kind word.
Right.
It's not a place. Prison isn't a place where you practice kindness. You don't go, oh, here, let me get the door for you, Travis.
Right.
Let me go. Let me help you out. Oh, do you need help carrying that? Nobody does that.
Right.
I mean, I ain't doing that. It's a lazy, aggravated environment. But through example, I feel like I helped other people.
Right.
And those same people that followed that example and did it back, that reciprocated that help, are great people. A lot of those men are still locked up. A lot of those men have life sentences, but they're good people.
You got out. It's been 7 months now? That's it?
That's it.
That's it, gosh. I feel like you've accomplished so much within the 7 months. And I don't know if you see that for yourself as well, compared to other people that get out or, whatnot. But I've seen you've accomplished so much. And you have an amazing mentality for yourself. Like, it's always positive. It's always, regardless of what you're going through, it's like, okay, well, I'm going to work this situation out. And I think that's great, right? I think what your purpose is to inspire others to, make better decisions, right? That's what I strongly feel your purpose is. Whether or not that's what it is for you, that's for you to decide. But if you could talk to somebody that has already made a poor decision and is getting ready to go to prison, what would you tell them about their mindset going into a situation that you've already been through and came from?
What would I tell them? That's a big thing, man. Again, every person's experience is going to be different, depending on who they come in contact with. I would say that depending on what they went in for and how much time they had, if it's somebody going in with a similar situation as me and they have a life sentence, to create a life, to stay in touch with your family as much as possible, to try to live each day. And this goes for people on the street. A prison can be a mentality. A prison can be anything. There's people that make a prison out of drug addiction. You got to live your day as best as possible. You've got to stay positive in your heart. Mind, body, and soul. That was a big thing for us, was mind, body, and soul. And what we do is we'd read, we'd pray, and we'd work out. So if you can carry that into any situation, mind, body, and soul, and realize that everything physical can be gone in an instant. So knowing that in prison, like you get put in a cell, you get put on what we call strip. And what they do is they take all your property, all your sheets, they just leave you with a mat, right? I've been in those situations. I've been on strip where you don't have anything. And it made me value the things inside of myself more. You realize that the value of things inside of you is worth way more than the things that are outside of you. And yeah, sure, like money's a comfort and, financial security is a must. People are working towards that. We're in a capitalist society. But if that's the basis of all things in your life, then you're telling me that everybody who doesn't have money, look at the poor countries in the world. Everybody that has money isn't happy. There's no reason they should be existing then, right? If they don't have anything in their life that's worthwhile, why should they exist? You've got to find the things that are in here, or you're going to begin to demoralize your own existence. You're going to begin to take away from it. You're going to begin to extract the negativity from your existence and then use that as fuel. That's no good.
Okay.
So just remember what's inside is what's important, and to make the best out of every day. You're still alive. You're still blessed.
Gotcha. So I mentioned that I have children. I'm very upfront with my children. I tell them everything that I've been through, mistakes that I've made, and I feel me doing that carved them a different path. They were able to sit up here and learn from my mistakes and not make those same decisions, right? Younger you, if you could go back and tell yourself anything, what would you tell yourself?
All kinds of stuff. Probably the winning lottery numbers. But most of all, and since we're speaking on children, I'm very, my son is a sacred area for me. Mm-hmm. My child is 25 years old. He is incredible. He's an incredible person. I've never, even now, being out 7 months, I've never touched my son or held my son as a free man. First time I held him, he wrapped his little 5-month-old hand around my finger and squeeze so tight. And I can remember the last time that I touched him. You know, all of that is while being incarcerated. We just haven't lined up our schedules to be able to see each other. He's in the Air Force and I'm poor. So when you're poor, you can't travel, you can't do those things. You know, I don't have a mother that says, okay, hey, let me pay for your trip to go see your son.
Right.
I've got to try and grind that out on my own. And it's, you know, I don't want to say poor. I'm just not financially in a place to where I can do those sort of things. And
Right.
he's got obligations to the country that supersede his father right now. So, I mean, it's cool, but we're going to see each other. We're very close. It's the things that I told him, you know, you have to cherish the things that you really love. And I'm not talking about your car or your fancy watch or any of that stuff, but the things that you truly love, the things that, even if it's an animal, a cat or a dog, like if you love that dog, you're going to make sure that dog's fed. You're going to make sure that that dog's cleaned up. You're going to scratch that dog every time you see it. You're going to pet the cat, whatever. It's the same thing, man. You're going to cherish the people that you have around you. That's the best thing. And if more children cherished their parents and respected their parents and stayed in that same mind, body, and soul state, they read more, they worked out more, they prayed more, they'd be in a better place. I had something to say to myself, it would be to go back and do that, to pray more, to read more, to work out more, to be focused on the things that are going to carry me through.
Do you think if you could have told yourself that at 14, 15, that you would have made the same decisions that you made that brought you to being a convicted felon?
No.
Okay.
I don't think I would have made those decisions at all. And that's, again, coming from a broken home where there's no guidance. Mm-hmm. Guidance is everything. You know, you remember your teachers from school. One thing that we going to remember, you can always remember a teacher from school that taught you something. You'll reflect back, you know what, I remember Mr. So-and-so such. Oh, they were so nice to me, they taught me this. You always got a favorite teacher. It's the same thing, man. Are our children really being taught? Are our children really being guided? Is there time for that? You know, some single parents, they work. It's not their fault that they got to put food on the table, that they got to get the new pair of shoes.
Right.
But do we appreciate the sacrifice? Do we appreciate our parents? Do we appreciate the time that they put in? Or do we rebel in our own mind?
Right.
They need that extra person. And more people need to get out. If you've got a niece or you got a nephew, get out there and go see them. You've got a sister or a brother that's younger and you need to talk to them. What's a few words? How much? 30 minutes out of the day, how much is that?
Right.
30 minutes out of the day, 30 minutes out of your week, and the impact it could have in that person's life. A teacher taught you an hour in school, 2 hours in school, right?
Right.
5 days a week.
Yeah.
Right? So 5 hours a week. Let's just say you were paying attention for those 5 hours. 5 hours a week. And you can't do that for a loved one? You can't do that for somebody that you care about? You know?
It's powerful.
Yeah.
I think we're coming to an end. Mm-hmm. What needs to be said that we haven't covered? What's on your mind? What's your final thoughts?
My final thoughts here, you know, we're on this podcast, Travis, that you created. You know, this is something that you generated out of your own thoughts and your own mind or your own heart. Mm-hmm. And we're talking about convicted, right? We're talking about gentlemen like you that have a felony, talking about gentlemen like me that have a felony, that there's more and more people going to prison and getting out. There's more and more people making mistakes. How do we change it? Now, there's going to be entities and people that don't want that change. They don't want these things to happen. But how do we slow this down? How do we stop losing our loved ones to prison cells? How do we stop violence? How do we stop, especially senseless violence?
Right.
Because it happens all of the time. People don't realize that pebble in the pond. When you take that pebble and you drop it in the pond, what happens?
Yeah, ripple effect.
There's a ripple effect.
Right.
So hurt men hurt other men. It's just fact. And we damage each other as a society. We put all these stipulations, we put all these facets of different views upon a person, especially at a young age. And men more so. You got to be a tough guy. You got to be like this. You need to be like that. Okay, cool. That's all right. Yeah, you okay? You can do that, but there's a positive environment for it. We need to change. We need to volunteer our time. Everything shouldn't be something that's paid for. You know? The best things in life are things that you didn't pay for. And like we can scratch the surface. A relationship that you have to pay for. That's a horrible thing to be in.
Right.
Because you're paying for the affection when someone willingly gives it to you. If the dog only loves you when you give it food, what is that? The dog loves you all the time, whether you got the food or not.
Right.
Okay? So give your time. Give your time without getting the pay. Take an hour out of your week. What is that? What's the average pay in the United States right now? Let's just say it's $20 an hour.
Right.
$30 an hour. It's costing you $30.
I don't think it's 30. Not the average.
Let's just say that's what it is. You know what I mean? Let's just say let's just throw that number out there because most people don't make $30 an hour.
Right.
Let's just throw that number out there. Cost you $30 for 1 hour of your time. How can you impact a person's life or impact society as a whole if everybody just took 1 hour out of every week to do something completely kind-hearted?
Right.
Just kind. 1 hour every week.
Yeah. Things would change, right?
I mean, at least as a further society, as America's supposed to be. I mean, we're convicted.
Right.
We're not dead. We're not given an opportunity to do something better. And yeah, past mistakes happen. But that isn't the end all be all for everyone. That isn't that one defining moment isn't the end all be all for everything later for the rest of your life.
Right. And people change. You're not defined by your mistakes. People change. Not everybody is going to change. Like I've always been told, I'm like that 1 out of 10. I'm that 1 out of 10 because I'm the one that's going to go push to be successful. I'm not going to let, my felonies prevent me. Okay, if I couldn't rent a house, I went and bought a house. If I couldn't get a job, okay, I created my own, company. And it's just the mindset, the same mindset that you have. Like you said, you're going to make it happen no matter what it takes, right?
And that's another thing we haven't talked about is you right now.
Yeah.
Bro, like I literally have stuff that I wore yesterday that you gave me when I first got out. You ain't giving me them clothes. I slept in a pair of shorts you gave me. They probably might have been your favorite shorts. Right. You know what I mean? Hey, bro, I just got this for you.
I had some favorite items in there. I was like, man.
You did. And like, without your kindness, without you coming to do that, I might not have had nothing to sleep in. I mean, everything that's on me, except for my shoes. Yeah, everything on me, except for my shoes, has been given to me. My belt, my drawers, everything. But my shoes, these are the shoes that I walked out of jail in. Okay. I wear them every now and then to remind me, especially with today, with coming here and seeing you and doing this, to remind me, man, I walked out the same way, you know what I mean? I walked out on my own 2 feet. I didn't walk out in a wheelchair. I didn't go out in a casket, you know? So
that's powerful.
I wear these to remind me, man. But again, the things that you've done, man, you did that kindness.
Right.
Where does it come from? Where does it come from, Charles? Where does your kindness come from?
Within. It's me. It's me as a person.
Okay, how did you get it?
I taught myself how to be kind. I taught myself to be who I am. Literally, I taught myself how to be who I am. Because I didn't have that father figure to teach me, this stuff. And single family home, again, it was, my mother lacked a lot of things that I should have got within and learned who I am or how to become who I am. So I had to teach myself to, do nice things even when you don't have to, or, do nice things for people that not necessarily that need it or that you care about. So
and another thing, I know you're an amazing father, man. How did you gain those traits? Not having a father, how did you gain those traits? Where did you learn those at?
I took every negative in my life and I changed it to a positive.
Why?
Why?
Yeah, why?
Because it was important, and I knew it was important. And I knew where my life ended up. So I remember when first I found out that, we were pregnant and I was going to have twins. I was on a basketball court, couldn't shoot the ball for nothing, but I was telling myself how I was going to be as a father and what was going to be important. And no matter what I went through, I was going to be there. But yeah, I think even if you don't have that influence in your life or that person in your life, if you sit up here and understand that you can change all your negative in your life into a positive, no matter what, you can make change. And I think it just starts within us. If I changed me, And I know that I have 6 kids following behind me. I got 5 boys and all of them are in college. I never wanted to go to college. In high school, I never thought I would go to college. And when I came home from the military and I got in college, I was like, okay, I'm just going to get an AA degree. And then I was like, wow, I got an AA degree, but I earned 2 because I took so many classes. And I was like, I can go get me a bachelor's degree. And then I was like, if I get a bachelor's, I get a master's. But I hated school. I didn't think I could do it. I didn't believe in myself, but I did it, right? I turned my negatives into a positive.
And how hard was that? Was it hard?
At first, of course. I think anytime you do something for the first time is difficult. But after you get into it, it just becomes easy. It's one foot in front of the other.
What was your biggest obstacle during that time period?
Mindset. Telling me how, learning how to do it, learning what to do. I mean, now that I'm helping my children navigate through college, it's like, I didn't know this stuff growing up. How did I learn it? I had to go research. I had to talk to teachers that taught me, instructors, guidance counselors, VA advocates that mentored me and say, hey, this is how you do this. But that wasn't their job. I'm doing it. So, that was my parents' job. But I'm doing it as a parent. So I know that now.
And now, we've talked about being convicted, being felons. You're a convicted felon.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of this you see passed on to children and grandchildren.
Mm-hmm.
You see, okay, the father went to prison.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, your father died in a prison cell. You see this passed on. You obviously broke the cycle because look at where your children are at. My son, again, he's definitely doing good in life. He's doing a lot better than I did.
Right.
It's breaking that cycle. Was that something that you were worried about, that they might follow in your footsteps?
No. I wasn't worried about it because I knew that I wasn't going to allow that to happen. I knew that I would set the example for them to see what not to do, because I made the changes. And again, not everybody changes. Not everybody. I'm big on. I feel like everybody has. What is the word? Everybody has. What is that word? Potential. Everybody has potential, but not everybody's gonna live up to their potential, right? I knew with me, I was gonna live up to it. When I created my path and I said this is where I want to be, I'll get it done. But it's a mindset thing. So, what's next for Michael Rosado?
What's next for me is I'm launching my own company, Florida Prison Consultants. I'm hoping to start my own podcast called Reformed Mindset. In fact, you were the person that came up with the name. Mm-hmm. I appreciate that. You are a genius when it comes to these things. You're a very entrepreneurial spirit, and it has rubbed off on me.
That's good.
I hope to be able to do more for my son now as an adult man. I'm very focused. I'm one of those people. I don't drink. I don't do drugs. I'm not running around rampant, doing the most. I'm still learning about life, steps at a time. I've had great experiences. I've been doing an NFL game already. In 2 weeks, I go to in a week and a half, I go to a hockey game. I go to Tampa Bay Lightning game.
Okay.
My attorney bought tickets for me. Again, it's the kindness of everybody else that has done things for me. Getting my driver's license was a big accomplishment.
Definitely looking forward to what you got to offer in the future. So definitely stay involved in that. I think that is going to wrap everything up with us today. All right. I know we're running a little over on our time on our episode, but it was definitely great. And I definitely look forward to continuing this. So I think that's going to be it. That's going to wrap everything up, guys. So Convicted, thank you.